I woke up and my kids' rooms were empty. My fiancée had sold all their furniture and left on a trip with her daughters. She texted, "My girls deserve Paris." I just smiled. 14 days later, they returned. I had prepared a much bigger gift for her. When she saw it, she went silent. I woke up and my kids' rooms were empty. Not messy empty. Not there at grandma's and forgot to make their beds. Empty. Stripped. The first thing I noticed was the silence. No muffled cartoon voices from Ivy's room. No thud of Noah jumping off his bed, even though I'd told him 100 times that one day he'd crack his skull open and I'd have to explain to the ER doctor why my son thought gravity was optional. The house sounded wrong, like it had been hollowed out overnight. Then I stepped into the hallway and saw the door to Noah's room wide open. My stomach dropped so fast it felt like I'd missed a stair in the dark. I pushed the door wider with 2 fingers, already knowing something was off, already feeling that cold, electric kind of dread that creeps under your skin before your brain can name it. His room was bare. The bed was gone. The dresser was gone. The rug with the little blue rockets on it, gone. Even the cheap plastic lamp shaped like a moon, the one he insisted helped him dream better, had vanished from his bedside table because the bedside table itself had vanished too. The only thing left was a faint square of unfaded paint where the dresser had stood and one lonely sock in the corner. I just stood there, staring. "Noah?" I called, but my voice came out rough, too low. Then I ran to Ivy's room. Same thing. Her white bed frame with the chipped post she'd covered in glitter stickers. Gone. Her bookcase. Gone. Her little vanity mirror where she played at being grown. Gone. Her curtains, with the yellow flowers, ripped down. Only the marks in the carpet remained, pale shadows of where her life had been. For a second, I honestly thought we'd been robbed. Then I saw the note on the kitchen island. Not even a note, really. Just my phone buzzing against the granite. A text from Marissa. "My girls deserve Paris. Don't make this dramatic. We'll be back in 2 weeks." Under it was a photo. Marissa in oversized sunglasses at the airport. Her highlighted hair loose around her shoulders. Lips pursed in that smug half smile she used whenever she thought she'd done something clever. Beside her were her daughters, Sienna and Paige, each wheeling a pink suitcase I recognized because I had paid for both of them last Christmas. They looked thrilled. Behind them, bright and gleaming, was the departure board. Paris. I read the text 3 times. Then I looked around the kitchen. The coffee machine was still there because she never used it. My lunch cooler sat by the back door, packed the night before for work. My plastering tools were stacked by the mudroom where I'd left them after finishing a ceiling patch in a Georgian terrace across town. My kids' rooms had been gutted, but my things were untouched. That was when I understood. She hadn't robbed the house. She had sold my children's furniture to fund a trip for her daughters. I actually laughed. A short, quiet laugh. The kind that comes out when anger is so sharp it slips past shouting. If anyone had seen me in that kitchen, 6'2", covered in old plaster dust from yesterday's job, one hand still on my phone, they might have thought I was losing my mind. Maybe I was. I called her. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. Then I called Sienna. She was 19, old enough to know better, but she'd learned from her mother that consequences were something that happened to other people. She declined the call. I set the phone down very carefully. Then I walked back into Noah's room and crouched to pick up the sock in the corner. It was tiny. Red heel, gray toe. Mine and Alyssa's son's sock. Alyssa, my late wife, used to buy them in packs because she said kids' socks disappeared into another dimension the second they touched a washing machine. I held that sock in my hand, and all at once, the cold anger sharpened into something cleaner. Not panic, not grief. Decision. I'm Gideon. I'm 38 years old, and I work as a plasterer. Not some glamorous career. Not the sort of thing people brag about at dinner parties. But I'm good at it. Very good. I can walk into a room with cracked walls, sagging corners, water damage, bad patchwork done by men who shouldn't be allowed near a trowel, and leave it smooth as still water. There's a satisfaction in that. In making something solid again. Clean again. Whole. Alyssa used to say that was my nature too, that I had the soul of a repairman, that if the world broke, I'd try to mend it with my bare hands. Maybe that was true. Maybe that was my problem. Because after Alyssa died 3 years ago, I tried to repair everything: the kids, the house, myself, and then, eventually, Marissa. I met Marissa at a school fundraiser. I was there because Ivy had painted a crooked watercolor fox I was told I absolutely had to bid on. And Marissa was there because her daughters attended the same private arts program on scholarship after a move from another district. She was pretty in a polished, expensive looking way, though I later learned expensive looking and actually expensive were two very different things. She had a warm laugh, knew how to look directly at you when you spoke, and she had that practiced softness some people wear like cashmere, luxurious from a distance, itchy once you get too close. She listened when I talked about the kids. That mattered more than anything. When you're a widower with 2 children, people don't date you. They evaluate your damage. They measure the grief in the room and decide whether it's manageable. Marissa didn't seem afraid of it. She said things like, "You've been so strong," and "those children are lucky to have you." And at the time, I heard compassion. What I didn't hear was appetite. The first year with her was easy. Too easy. She moved in slowly but decisively, like Ivy taking a wall. First a toothbrush, then a drawer, then her daughters staying weekends, then longer. Then she started talking about blending our families as though it were a smoothie and not 4 children with histories, loyalties, and hurts. Sienna, the older one, was sharp-faced and pretty and had mastered the art of disdain by 16. Paige was sweeter on the surface, all hair flips and breathy, "Oh my God? Seriously?" But she watched everything. Both girls had grown up with Marissa's constant chorus. They deserved better, more, the best. Better schools, better clothes, better experiences, better men around their mother, better treatment than the world had given them. At first, I admired that she wanted more for them. Then I noticed she only wanted more when someone else was footing the bill. It started small. "Gideon, Sienna's school trip is due, and I'm a little short this month. Paige really shouldn't be the only girl without a proper winter coat. The girls feel left out when you take Ivy and Noah for weekends away. We should be treating all 4 kids equally." Equal, in Marissa's language, always meant my children got less, so hers could get more. I paid for dance fees, new phones, orthodontist consults, designer trainers that were somehow essential for teenage self-esteem. Every time I hesitated, Marissa tilted her head and looked wounded. "You knew I came as a package," she'd say softly. Or worse, "I thought you loved all the girls." Loved. As though love were proven with bank transfers. There were little moments I ignored because grief had left me hungry for peace. The day Ivy came to me in tears because Paige had borrowed her birthday bracelet from Alyssa's mother and scratched it beyond repair. The time Noah asked why Sienna got to redecorate her room twice in 6 months, but he had to keep his old furniture until it wore out. The Christmas when Marissa insisted her girls open gifts first, because they're older and understand gratitude more, which was such nonsense, even Noah stared at her. I corrected what I could. Smoothed what I could. Paid what I could. That's what men like me do when we think love is labor. We keep plastering over the cracks. The real trouble began after I proposed. I know. Stupid. But by then, she'd woven herself into the house so thoroughly that leaving felt like tearing skin. The kids had routines. The wedding was meant to happen in late summer. We weren't legally joined yet, thank God, but the house, my house, the one Alyssa and I bought together, had become Marissa's stage. The proposal changed something in her. Maybe it made her feel secure. Maybe it made her greedy. Maybe it simply revealed what had always been there. She started talking about the wedding like a coronation. Nothing simple, nothing intimate. She wanted a venue. Floral arches, custom dresses for her daughters, a destination hen trip, a photographer flown in from Milan, because his light is unreal. She said this while sitting at my kitchen table, tapping on my laptop, spending money I hadn't earned yet. "I'm a plasterer, Marissa," I reminded her once. She laughed. "You own your own crew half the time and do private restoration jobs for rich people. Don't act humble now." That sentence stuck with me because it told me exactly what she saw when she looked at me. Not Gideon. Not the man who got up before dawn to drive across county lines and come home with aching wrists and mortar in his hair. Just an income source in steel toe boots. I should have ended it then. But life doesn't usually break in one loud crack. It comes apart in pressure lines, hairline fractures, repeated stress. Then, one morning you wake up and your children's rooms are empty. I called my solicitor by 9. By 10:30, I had changed the locks. By noon, I had pulled every security camera back up from the cloud. Marissa had forgotten one important detail about living with a man who spends his days estimating damage and planning repairs. I notice everything. The driveway camera caught the van arriving at 10:12 a.m. the previous day. The side entrance camera showed Marissa overseeing two men from a secondhand furniture broker hauling bed frames, dressers, rugs, lamps, even the toy chest Alyssa's father had built for Noah before he was born. She sold everything in one afternoon. I watched her point to Ivy's room while sipping iced coffee. I watched her daughters laugh over something as they carried out boxes of books. At 2:46 p.m., Marissa stood in the hallway taking mirror selfies while strangers stripped my children's bedrooms bare. At 4:03 p.m., the broker transferred payment. She had been stupid enough to do it electronically. At 5:14 p.m., she used part of the money to book 4 business class seats to Paris. I sat in my office and watched all of it without blinking. Anger is one thing. Evidence is better. Then I started making calls. You learn a lot about people when you work in trades. People think men with rough hands don't have networks. They think because you don't wear cufflinks, you don't know anyone. But old houses belong to old money. Old money belongs to old families. And families always need reliable tradesmen. I knew locksmiths, solicitors, estate agents, auctioneers, a family law barrister whose kitchen I had repaired after a bad leak, a headmistress who still owed me a favor after I fixed the crumbling cornice in her library at cost because she'd once quietly helped Ivy through a rough term after Alyssa died. By the end of that first day, I had done 4 things. First, I documented every item sold with proof of ownership. Second, I secured temporary emergency orders preventing unauthorized access to the children's trust assets and my personal accounts. Third, I had formal notice prepared rescinding Marissa's right to occupy my property. And fourth, my favorite, I arranged for the restoration and redesign of the 2 empty bedrooms to begin the next morning. Because if Marissa had wanted a surprise, I could do better. Alyssa left money for the children. Not enormous wealth, but enough. She had been sensible, organized, the kind of woman who made lists for her lists. Before the cancer got bad, she made sure Ivy and Noah each had protected education trusts and a clause in her will that kept those funds away from any future partner of mine, unless legally adopted under strict conditions. I had never told Marissa the details. She knew there was something put aside. She assumed engagement made her entitled to it. A month before the Paris stunt, I caught her in my office rifling through paperwork. She smiled and said she was just trying to help organize. That was the first time I moved the files. The second time was when she asked too casually whether I'd ever considered using some of Alyssa's legacy so all 4 girls could have a stronger start. She had a way of wrapping theft in therapeutic language. I looked at her then and saw it plain as day. She didn't love my children. She resented that Alyssa had protected them. So while Marissa posted selfies from Paris cafes and captions about making memories with my queens, I rebuilt my children's rooms. Not just replaced, rebuilt. Noah got a proper custom bed with storage drawers underneath because he loved hiding comics and treasure maps and bits of string he swore were useful. I had the walls painted a deep smoky blue with a hand-stenciled constellation ceiling. A carpenter friend built shelves shaped like staggered rooftops. We replaced the moon lamp with a better one. Ivy got soft sage walls, a reading nook under the window, a white oak desk, floating shelves, new curtains embroidered with yellow flowers, because she'd once told me her old ones made the room feel like morning all day. I found a craftsman to recreate the vanity sturdier this time, and had her initials carved inside the drawer. I worked alongside the crew in the evenings after my plaster jobs. My hands were raw, my shoulders burned, and I slept maybe 4 hours a night. But every smooth wall, every fitted shelf, every measured line felt like reclaiming something sacred. The children were with my sister Helen during those 2 weeks. I told them there'd been a surprise project at home, and because they trusted me, they didn't press too hard. Helen did. When I told her what Marissa had done, she went so still it scared me. Then she said, very calmly, "Do you need me to ruin her life, or are you managing?" "I'm managing. Pity," she said. On day 6, Marissa texted again. "You could at least send spending money since I funded this trip by handling things at home." Handling things at home. I stared at that sentence for a solid minute. Then I forwarded it to my solicitor. On day 9, Sienna called. Not to apologize, to ask whether she could come back with a friend in August and use the house because Europe has made me realize how small-minded England can be. I let her talk. Then I said, "That won't be possible." Pause. "Why not?" "Because you no longer live here." The silence that followed was delicious. Then came the screeching, the outrage, the "you can't do that to my mum," the accusations that I was punishing them. I ended the call and blocked the number. On day 12, I received a message from Marissa's ex-husband, the father of her daughters. We'd spoken maybe twice in passing over the years. He was brief. "Heard the girls are in Paris on stolen furniture money. If you need statements about prior financial misconduct, I have records." That was useful. Apparently, I wasn't the first man Marissa had mistaken for an ATM. By the time their return flight landed, the house was quiet, polished, and legally fortified. I brought Ivy and Noah home that morning before noon. Their faces, when they saw the new rooms, I'd carry that memory to my grave. Noah ran in first, then froze with both hands on his cheeks. "Dad," he whispered, like the room might hear him. "Is this mine?" "All yours." He launched himself at me so hard, I nearly stumbled into the doorframe. Ivy didn't speak at first. She just walked slowly around her room, fingertips brushing the desk, the curtains, the shelves. Then she opened the vanity drawer and found the carved initials. Her lip trembled. She turned and hugged me around the waist with the fierce, silent strength Alyssa used to have. "It's like you knew," she said into my shirt. "I did know," I said. "I know you." That afternoon, I sent them to the garden with Helen and some lemonade when the taxi pulled up. I heard it before I saw it. The trunk slamming, wheels bumping over the front path. Marissa's bright, carrying voice complaining about the weather as though the clouds had personally inconvenienced her. Then her key in the lock. Or rather, her failed attempt at a key in the lock. A beat of silence. Then a hard rattle. Then another. "Gideon," she shouted. "What?" I opened the front door before she could start pounding. Marissa stood there in cream travel trousers and a camel coat that cost more than my first car. Her airport glamour had wilted around the edges, but she still held herself like a woman expecting admiration. Behind her, Paige looked tired and annoyed. Sienna looked openly hostile. 4 suitcases sat on the path like obedient dogs. Marissa's smile was thin. "Why doesn't my key work?" "Because I changed the locks." She laughed once, like I'd made a joke that hadn't landed. "Very funny. Open the door." I did. Her expression shifted. "Gideon, there's a point in some arguments where the other person still thinks they control the script." Marissa was standing in that point. "I'm tired," she said. "The girls are tired. We'd had a long flight. Whatever sulk this is, we can discuss it inside." "No," I said. Just that. "No." Her daughters looked at each other. Marissa blinked. "Excuse me? You sold my children's furniture. You removed property from this house without authorization. You used the proceeds to take yourself and your daughters on holiday. You entered my office and attempted to access protected documents. You have no legal right to this property, and you are not coming back into it." Each sentence landed like a board laid flat. For once, she had nothing prepared. Then she drew herself up. "I was making executive decisions for our family." "Our family?" I said, and I actually smiled. "You gutted 2 children's bedrooms to buy croissants in Paris." Paige muttered, "Mum." Marissa cut her off with a sharp hand. "You are being unbelievably dramatic. It was just furniture." From behind me, a small voice said, "It was my room." Marissa looked past me and saw Ivy standing in the hallway. Everything that happened next is burned into me with perfect clarity. Ivy, in her yellow jumper, one hand wrapped around the stair rail. Noah beside her, jaw set the way boys do when they've seen enough adults lie. Helen in the kitchen doorway, arms folded, watching like a woman, one breath away from volunteering for violence. And Marissa, caught for the first time, not in a lover's quarrel, not in a financial disagreement, but in front of the actual children she had harmed. She tried to soften her face. "Oh, sweetheart." "No," Ivy said. "My 10-year-old daughter. You said my room was childish, and your girls needed more." Marissa went pale. I hadn't heard that part. Not until then. I turned slowly back to her. "You told her that?" It was taken out of context. Helen barked a laugh. I stepped aside just enough for Marissa to see down the hallway, to see both new rooms, the painted walls, the shelves, the beds, the care, the restoration. Her mouth opened slightly. That was the bigger gift I had prepared for her. Not revenge, exactly. Revelation. I wanted her to see, in one glance, the difference between what she did and what I was capable of, between extraction and devotion, between taking and building. Then I handed her an envelope. "What is this?" She snapped. "Open it." She tore it in that angry, elegant way some people have, trying to make aggression look graceful. Inside were copies, the notice of removal from the property, the inventory of sold items, the police report number, a civil demand for recovery of stolen property value, statements from her ex-husband relating to prior financial deception, and one final page from my solicitor, formally confirming that none of Alyssa's estate, trusts, or protected assets were accessible to Marissa now or ever. She read the first page quickly, the second slower. By the third, the color had drained from her face. When she got to the last page, her eyes flicked up to mine. "What is this?" she whispered. "The truth." Her voice dropped further. "You went to a solicitor?" "The same morning." "You filed reports?" "The same morning." "You involved my ex?" He volunteered. Sienna stepped forward. "This is insane." "No," Helen said from behind me. "This is overdue." Marissa looked around as if expecting the old Gideon to appear. The patient one. The man who softened things. The man who took the sting out of every consequence and called it love. He was gone. "You can't do this," she said. But it no longer sounded like outrage. It sounded like fear. "We're engaged." "Not anymore." "That ring. Keep it," I said. "Sell it for spending money." Though I imagine Paris was expensive. For the first time in the entire conversation, she went silent. Completely silent. Not because she had run out of words, because she had finally understood them. Her daughters looked shaken now. Not wounded princess shaken. Real shaken. The kind that comes when the person who always seemed invincible suddenly doesn't. Paige looked at the papers in Marissa's hand. "Mom, did you really sell the kids' stuff?" Marissa turned on her instantly. "Don't start." That told them enough. Sienna's face hardened, but not at me this time. At her mother. I watched the realization spread through both girls. This wasn't a misunderstanding they could style their way out of. Their mother had overplayed her hand, and the man she thought she owned had not only left the table, he'd taken the whole game with him. I set their 4 suitcases outside the gate. "You have 10 minutes to leave the property before I call the police to enforce the notice." Marissa stared at me. "You would humiliate us like this?" I almost laughed. "You flew to Paris on my children's beds." That was the end of it. They left. Not dramatically. No operatic screaming. No collapse on the path. No final cinematic speech. Just dragging luggage, tight faces, the scrape of wheels, the slam of the taxi boot. And Marissa, for once in her life, with nothing to say, the aftermath was uglier than the moment, as aftermaths usually are. She tried every route, tearful messages from unknown numbers, mutual friends calling to say she was spiraling, and I should show compassion. A social media post implying I had financially abused her after promising stability. My solicitor enjoyed that one. Defamation makes people suddenly cautious. Then came the bargaining. If I dropped the claim, she'd return some of the money. If I let her collect her things, she'd stop the drama. If I thought of the girls, surely I wouldn't want to traumatize them further. The problem with manipulation is that once you see the mechanism, it becomes boring. So I kept going. The broker who bought the furniture faced with documentation and possible legal entanglement, cooperated quickly. Some items were recovered, not all. Enough. The rest was valued and added to the claim. The ring was appraised. I let it go. That was the cost of education. Within a month, Marissa had moved into a rental flat 2 towns over with her daughters. I later heard from her ex-husband that Sienna started spending more time with him. Page 2, eventually. Apparently, Paris hadn't been worth the crash landing. As for Ivy and Noah, children are strange, resilient creatures. They don't always say the thing that hurts them most. Sometimes they ask around it. A week after everything, Noah sat on his new bed and asked, "Dad, did she not like us?" The question went through me like a blade. I sat beside him and chose honesty, the kind children can carry. "She liked what this house could give her," I said. "But real family means caring about people, not using them. That part she didn't know how to do." He nodded slowly. Then he said, "You do." And that nearly broke me more than anything else. Ivy handled it differently. She got quieter for a while, protective, watching me. One evening, I found her in the kitchen, folding tea towels with impossible precision, the way Alyssa used to when she was upset. "You don't have to help," I told her. "I know." She kept folding. "I just want things neat." I leaned against the counter. "Things can be messy sometimes. We'll still be okay." She looked up at me then, eyes too old for 10. "You picked us," she said. "What?" "When she made you choose. You picked us." I went around the counter and hugged her before she saw my face. Because that was it, really, the center of it all. She had expected me to choose peace over principle, her over the children, convenience over duty, and I had finally chosen correctly. The house changed after that. Not in some magical movie way where pain evaporates. There were awkward silences, hard questions, nights when I lay awake replaying every sign I'd ignored. But the air cleared. The tension went with her. We could breathe again. On Sundays, I made pancakes with Noah while Ivy read at the counter and corrected my measurements like a tiny foreman. I took fewer extra jobs and more evening walks. I framed one of Alyssa's old sketches and hung it in the hall where Marissa had wanted a gold mirror. I let the kids be loud again. I let myself be still. A few months later, I got a handwritten note from Paige. Short, slanted, awkward. She said she was sorry. Not for everything, not with grand insight. Just sorry. She said she hadn't understood how much their mother pushed and pushed until taking felt normal. She said seeing Ivy that day in the hallway had made her feel sick. She said Paris had been beautiful and awful. I wrote back once. I told her accountability was a beginning, not a speech. I wished her well. That was enough. The last twist came in spring. Alyssa's mother visited for tea. She walked through the house slowly, stopping at the children's rooms, touching the door frames, taking everything in. Then she sat at my kitchen table and slid a small envelope toward me. "What's this?" "Alyssa asked me to give it to you when I believed you were ready." Inside was a note in Alyssa's handwriting. "Gideon, you always think love means carrying more than your share. It doesn't. The children need your tenderness, yes, but they also need your boundaries. Please don't confuse sacrifice with goodness forever. Build a peaceful home, not a hungry one. And when the time comes, choose us." I read it twice. Then I folded it carefully and put it in my wallet. So that's the story. I woke up and my kids' rooms were empty. My fiancée had sold all their furniture and left on a trip with her daughters. She texted, "My girls deserve Paris." I just smiled. Because by the time she came back 14 days later, the locks were changed, the evidence was filed, the children's rooms were more beautiful than before, and every illusion she'd built around herself had already collapsed. When she saw what I had prepared for her, she went silent. Not because I shouted louder, not because I humiliated her, because for the first time, she stood in front of something she could neither manipulate nor buy her way through. A man who had stopped confusing love with surrender. I'm still a plasterer. Still up before dawn most mornings. Still smoothing other people's damaged walls while the radio mumbles in the background, and my wrists ache by noon. But these days, when I come home, the house feels right. Solid. No hidden fractures, no one stripping pieces from the children to decorate someone else's fantasy. And if there's a moral in all this, maybe it's simple. Some people enter your life like guests and start measuring the silver. Some call greed need, call entitlement healing, call theft fairness. Let them talk. Listen to what they do. Then protect what matters. I spent too long trying to be kind in ways that required my children to go without. Too long trying to keep peace with a woman who fed on access, attention, and money. Too long plastering over cracks in a structure that was rotten clear through. Not anymore. Now I know the difference between a home and a stage set. A home is built for the people inside it, and mine is